In the last lecture, we talked about supply chain coordination. In this lecture, we are going to continue our discussion on supply chain operational strategies, as I mentioned in the last lecture, last part. So recall our part one from lecture 7. We discussed about bullwhip effect, which is something that can happen in the inventory management when there's a misleading information passes down due to psychological and physical distances. I've shown you some diagrams related to the bulb effect, so hope you guys have understood those. And today we're going on to discuss a new strategy called vendor-managed inventory. So vendor-managed inventory is one of the key coordination mechanisms in supply chain management. It manages basically the basic principle of this strategy is that the supplier manages the inventory at the customer's premise, which means the supplier is the one who is in charge of the management. It can be a little bit complicated to understand how this works. So for example, if in this case LG Display is a supplier or CJ a Korean conglomerate, and in this case LG Electronics or eMart both are Korean. LG Electronics is basically the Korean electronic company which sells the televisions, phones, and so on, computers. eMart is a Korean supermarket chain. So both of them are our customer at this place because they are buying their inventories from the supplier. But now what happened is now the supplier are going to manage their inventory, and LGE and eMart are going to pass information to the supplier. So for example, if now LGE needs 100 TV, 100 for example certain chips, silicon chips. If LG Electronics at the moment require 100 silicon chips, they will basically pass this information to LG Display. So LG Display will get access to the data here. It is also part of coordination, you can argue that, and I think that's correct because suppliers basically are in charge. They hold certain information from the customer, and then they are going to prepare their inventories. This way is better for LG Electronics in terms of a quality product, because then the supplier is going to be able to have time to prepare this product, and they're able to put the efforts into supplying the certain inventory. And after the products ship to our customer, they then put in the plant or shelf space of the warehouses, then all to the distributor later on, and in the end it's transported to the end customer. So vendor managed inventory in this case means eMart or LG Electronics are not managing the inventories themselves anymore, but they outsource the inventory management task to the supplier. So the supplier not only gives their products, but they also hold information related to how much products do they need. So they are then going to produce, they are going to get hold of the information of how much products, how much supplies do the eMart or LG Electronics need, and then these companies are going to LGD and CJ are going to hold their inventories, prepare the amount demanded by the customer, and hold them inside the warehouses of the suppliers. So what are some advantages of this strategy? Now let's after erases, I'll explain to you what are the advantages. So what are the advantages? So look at this diagram right here. So at first, the advantage of a vendor managed inventory is basically the suppliers have direct access to demand information, because the EJ or eMart and LG Electronics are giving directly information passing the information directly to LG Display and CJ on how much supermarket products do they need, how much screens do they need, how much silicon chips do they need, how much a certain metal do they need. So they're basically passing information, and then this means the supplier will have a direct access and to the demand information. It's pretty good in this case for the supplier. For the vendor, it's quite good for the vendor because we've discussed in our previous lecture that holding too much inventory can actually incur waste if they are not sold. But when they're actually taking the task to manage inventory of the customer, actually they can ensure their inventory can be sold. At least they are not going to encounter the severe cost incurred from holding excessive inventory. So this is one advantage for the vendor in this case when they apply vendor managed inventory. And moreover, the sales can increase if their inventories can if they can sell more inventories compared to before when they did not establish this kind of a relationship between customer and themselves. So it can be beneficial, but then the downside is pretty high as well. I want to mention that actually many suppliers do not want to apply VMI. Although I'm going through this strategy in detail in this lecture, but actually in reality, not many suppliers want to apply VMI because in many other circumstances, they can actually save much more cost by inventory. Although by applying VMI, you can save much cost from excessive inventory, but then you have to also take your task. You're also in charge of managing the inventory of a customer. So compared to those businesses who are able to calculate the amount of inventory, who are able to make money just by directly selling the inventories in the market, it is much more costly and unnecessary. It's kind of not a good bargain for them to also in charge of the management whole thing. So that's why the inventory cost is a pretty big downside, I would say, for a vendor in terms of a vendor managed inventory. And many people, many suppliers are against this thing. So this is a problem. This is a problem right here. Okay, in terms of how for the customers, there are also main upside. The first upside is basically you can reduce inventory cost because you are not managing inventory themselves. But that is not the upside that the suppliers want when they take part in this part. What they want is what the customer want is, in this case, they want to improve the quality of their product to drive sales. So in this case, you are going to look at the thing you're going to look at is not it's not going to be quality, but actually it is going to be it's not going to be inventory cost, but it will be the quality. So the goal is to increase the quality rather than reducing the inventory cost. Because if you reduce the inventory cost, it doesn't make sense. Because then you have to pay for others to manage your inventory. So it's a zero-sum game. It's a zero-sum game, so no one is winning in this process. But when others can manage their inventory, it can mean when the vendor have access to the demand, it means they're able to manage and improve the quality of the product, which in turn to the customer, in turn for the customer, for the LG, they can actually increase their sales. So this is the advantages for supplier and customer. What is the disadvantage for the customer? It is basically the flexibility in choosing appropriate vendor goes down. Because once a specific supplier is managing your inventory, you actually have less chances to actually choose an alternative who will help you manage your inventories. And there's also this problem of information leakage, because I mentioned before, when you want to coordinate, you always have this issue of information leakage because you want to pass out certain information to the other participant. Well, you also don't want to show certain confidential information right here, so it can be a high disadvantage. So in this video, we've discussed a vendor managed inventory in a nutshell. I talked to you guys about what does it mean, and we went through the advantages and disadvantages. In the next video, we'll be focusing on postponement. So I will discuss a little bit more about vendor managed inventory, and we're now going to the third strategy that links to the mass customization. In the last lecture, I mentioned that mass customization is pretty important. It is kind of a counterintuitive performance, but when you implement it successfully, it is actually a way to both achieve the volume and achieve customization, which means you can charge both premium prices, while you can also increase the quantity of your product sold. So we'll discuss that in the next video.